When I was a young kid, I vividly remember being in a booster seat in the back of my mom's car. She would drive my sister and me around, running errands, visiting grandparents, seeing friends. Like most kids, I was persistently curious, and I remember incessantly watching her movements from the back seat as she zipped around in her manual Honda. I remember watching her hit a stock on the side of the steering wheel and asking her why she was doing that. I then proceeded to ask about every conceivable button, switch, and lever she touched, each answer bringing about an additional flurry of whys. Why you need it, when you use it, how and why we drive, everything until I understood all that I could about these things. This quickly turned into me asking about the nature of driving, rules for the road, and how one learns to drive, because I knew that I was going to someday. This is how car rides went with me as a child. The rides were generally short, and my questions were extensive. This was not an uncommon occurrence or something specific to just cars and driving, though. I would ask my dad about every single button on our computer, digital, physical, what it is, why it was there, why it looked a certain way, every annoying question a kid could think of. In hindsight, it was probably unbelievably unnecessary, annoying, and likely super incessant. But my dad was a great sport about it, even showing little 7-year-old me keyboard shortcuts and hidden menus. When I was younger, I would ask questions like this constantly. Most kids ask questions to understand, to intellectually explore the world, as well as sometimes, obviously, just to annoy one's parents. I did that a lot too. However, my parents said that I would just not stop asking these questions. When other kids would quit after a dozen or so, I would just keep peppering them with questions constantly. My parents said that they thought back to their own childhoods and their childish curiosity, and that's why they would try and answer every single one of my questions, because that's what they would have wanted when they were kids. They were wonderful. They stoked my childhood curiosity about the world in the best possible way, like parents are supposed to. I played sports with other kids that lived near me, but from quite a young age, I was content talking at length with other kids about things that they thought about the world. To my dismay, as you can imagine, many kids would quickly tire of simply talking and would want to go back to playing sports, games, or engage in other activities that they thought were more invigorating, more interesting. But the friends I did have were always people I could explore new ideas with and have deeper conversations. I vividly remember conversations about religion and the economics of toy prices with one of my best childhood friends when we were as young as 8. We would discuss the differences between different Christian denominations, Bible chapters, and even where the Lego market on eBay was going. As we got older, I would talk with friends about things like the role of technology in our future, new stuff that came out, and even things like our surface-level understanding of the stock market, investments, compound interest, and more before entering middle school. As I grew older, I found myself talking to people who were significantly older than I was. When my parents would have their friends come over, I would talk to them about politics, technology, business, startup companies, as many of them were working on these, science, engineering, and more. It was in these situations that I found true intellectual satisfaction. I yearned for this, day in and day out. Sadly, many of these adults didn't particularly want to have long and extensive chats with a teenager. So as a result, I turned to other things, like reading scientific papers, listening to college lectures, watching videos from Khan Academy, and even TED Talks. Lectures and talks on YouTube became my avenue to explore complex ideas that I couldn't with my peers, who were simply uninterested in these things, or so I thought. There were many get-togethers with groups of my friends, where I would sit off to the side, unbelievably uninterested in the conversations at hand. They would have some trivial conversations about drama at school, celebrities, the latest TV show, or teen dystopian movie that was only mildly interesting. After not too long, though, I wanted to move on and get to something more interesting. Not wanting to be pretentious, and after listening to some lectures about engaging in interesting conversation, I decided to try and reach out and talk more with my peers at these get-togethers. I'd talk to 1 or 2 people at a time and open with a question. I'd always do that. I would always start with something really open-ended so that someone could respond how they wanted. I wanted to learn from people and to better understand the world around me, different perspectives, and what people were thinking. Questions were the best way of doing this. People would talk about topics that they were interested in, and I would do my best to push the conversation deeper and deeper to get to the root of whatever the topic was. I really wanted to thoroughly explore what they had brought up, everything from gymnastics to music theory, relationships with coworkers to job prospects, dreams and aspirations, fears, anything. I would talk with anyone about anything as long as they were willing to go deep enough to make it interesting. I learned a lot of things doing this, about a vast array of topics, as those around me opened up. As a result, in high school, I got a reputation as someone people would inexplicably trust to share their secrets, rumors, and crushes. My wife could vouch for this. She would often joke about how I always seemed to know about everything and everyone's secrets. I learned that those around us have a lot to teach us, even if it might not appear that way on the surface. Sometimes we just have to dig a little to get at it. There were times when I would end up talking to people's parents, asking questions about their homes, what motivated them, the life they lived, and why they chose them. I found it very interesting just how different people's lives could be while still living in the same city. I grew up in a suburb right on the edge of a large metropolitan area. A 10-minute drive in one direction, and you could be in cornfields with tractors driving on the side of the road. 10 minutes in the other direction, and you'd be looking up at skyscrapers and surrounded by shops, public buses, and quaint city areas. Some people chose stereotypical suburban lives, polo shirts, mowing the lawn, a 9-to-5 job at a medium to large company, while others chose large city lives, taking the train to work, daycare for the kids, jobs in a high-rise, and still others chose very rural lives, tending to fields, riding four-wheelers, and homeschooling. I had a variety of family friends who fell into all of these categories. I was fascinated by the immense freedom to choose, fascinated by all these different ways of life, all the rationale behind people's choices, and the near infinite set of characteristic combinations one could choose. No matter where I was, I would ask as many questions to whomever would entertain them as possible. I got a reputation as someone who would ask very serious, pointed questions. Sometimes people weren't terribly interested, but oftentimes, people would look back with a level of confusion and deep thought as if no one had taken them completely seriously before. Like no one had ever asked what it was exactly that they were thinking. I could see in most people's eyes that they had something in them that longed for more, something that forced them to actually use their mental capacity, something to push the limits of their thoughts, something to test their presuppositions and to aid in the revelation of reality, something to make them truly think, if only for a moment. I lived for those moments, when their eyes would light up as their minds revealed things that they had not yet addressed to themselves, like they were activating a muscle they didn't know existed. Sometimes people would shy away from this, maybe out of fear, maybe for lack of comfort, maybe because I was just an awkward kid, or maybe because they wished to deny that part of themselves. The part they had let go hungry, the part they set off to the side, telling themselves it didn't actually exist. The responsibility for nurturing the curiosity they had abdicated for years, maybe even decades. It was this that I wanted to see in people. I wanted to see their full ideas and contend with them.